This is the budget edition of Taking Stock on ENCA. Hello and welcome. I'm Bruce Whitfield. 3 guests for you this evening as the dust settles on Budget 2019. A very warm welcome to Professor Keith Engel, former Treasury official, Chief Executive at the South African Institute of Taxation. Tebogo Lekhuleni, who is a business analyst at the consultancy Raizcorp, and economist Francois Stofberg from Efficient Group. Now, let's get on to the budget and just how bad a budget it was. Talk about cutting your cloth to suit to the pattern. It was a really tough environment, Keith Engel. I mean, you worked in Treasury, you worked in SARS and the large business unit. You know exactly the pressure points that occur in the months and days running up to the budget. Was it the best that we could get?
I think that was the only thing they had left. That's the problem. They have very, very little options left. I was surprised. I thought it wouldn't be quite as bad as this. But basically what they did is they just said, well, we're not going to give you any inflationary relief, which is what governments do as a last resort. They inflate their way out of the problem. But you don't have to change the law. It takes effect immediately, and you pick up your $15 billion. And they needed that $15 billion because the Revenue Service failed to get the $15 billion even after the changeover.
Let me ask you a really difficult question, and that is whether or not the tax increases that have been implemented over the last couple of years, pushing the marginal tax rate up to 45% for income earners over 1.5 million rand. It's a small group of people who can afford tax consultants. Whether the VAT increase, those sorts of increases, the higher excise duties, all of the stuff that we are used to receiving every single year, whether or not they've pushed it too far.
I think they ran out. They didn't. I don't know if they pushed it too far, but they couldn't push it any further. If they wanted to get the VAT up, they had to do it last year. They weren't going to put the VAT up again this year. If they pushed the 45% rate up any higher, what they already found is they weren't getting the revenue. You're already past a certain line in the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve says no more than 50%, but you know with the VAT and all the other charges that it's really the line is 40. So when you push it over 45, you add the VAT, you add all of that, really you're giving more of your money to government than you're earning yourself, which is quite depressing.
It is quite depressing. In real terms, tax rates could be between 60 and 65% for high income for high income earners. That's a lot of money to give away. You're working until about July, August before you actually earn a cent for yourself every single year. If I can do a little child's nursery rhyme for you, old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard, but the cupboard was bare, Francois. And Keith goes, we've run out of money, we've run out of runway. The country is not bankrupt, but we're not far off.
No. Definitely not. I think we did a very interesting research just to show that our GDP, if you look at the figures, let's say 60%, it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's not the real figure to look at. It's the rate at which you pay it back, of course. So you have to look at interest rates as well. So then if you look at interest rates as well and you compare countries again, we're actually the second most indebted country in the world. And India would be first. Not Japan, because remember their interest rate is almost zero. So they can just use inflation to get themselves out of their problem. And not the case in South Africa. So I think, like you truthfully said, we've run out of runway.
We're borrowing 1.2 billion rand every workday. We are paying interest on our borrowings of $1 billion rand every single workday. Every single day.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's the problem. So we're digging a hole, and that's why we're very concerned about this hole that we've dug ourselves. But some context, though, just some context. We still feel and are of opinion that there was a pivotal shift when Ramaphosa was elected. Not Ramaphosa, and I know markets ran with it and they liked the story, but it's not a change that comes overnight, and I think that's what people and markets are still hoping for, but it's a change that's going to take at least a decade.
I want to talk about ratings agencies, but we'll do that in a bit because they really matter right now. Your 1,000 incubated companies, the small, medium enterprises that Raizcorp helps grow, we need another 10,000 Raizcorps to solve the South African problem. But are they feeling more or less confident, or they just feel as beaten and badgered as ever small businesses do in South Africa?
Listen, everyone is taking a beating right now. I think also it stems along the spectrum of small businesses as well. They are feeling the impact of it. It's something that we've been saying a long time, saying that government needs to do more to help small businesses and entrepreneurs get a platform to grow their businesses, start their businesses, grow their business, expand their business, and become competitive in the environment and employ more people, reduce the unemployment rate. This is at the hands of the entrepreneurs, and unfortunately we are getting such a barrier to enter and do that.
But government seems to think it's its job to create the jobs, not
point.
to create the environment, to create the space for the likes of you guys who do enable the growth of businesses. They think they should be doing it. And government creates jobs. Governments don't create jobs.
They
right?
don't create jobs. It's the entrepreneurs, it's the small businesses, it's the corporates that are creating jobs out there. It's not the government. We are putting too much emphasis on them, and then when things don't work out, we're quick to say, oh, government this, government that. The ideal world is that the entrepreneurs are given a platform to explore their ideas, put it out into the market, compete, grow their businesses, employ more people, create opportunities for them to also improve their lifestyles, and in so doing, contributing to the economy.
It's kind of crazy sort of circle, isn't it, Keith Engel? Because as soon as that happens, more people pay more tax, government gets more revenue, fewer people depend on the state, and suddenly you can start building the infrastructure and the roads that leads to this utopia of 5 to 6% growth.
Yes. Well, I think the real problem here is that government doesn't give the small business space. So, forget special projects, incentives, all of this. We are regulating small business. And that's when he talks about this word barrier. When you want to start a business, even the smallest regulation will require an approval of some kind. And then that approval could be 6 months. Then you got to hire a consultant. That costs a lot of money. Then you got to have an employee. And you start spending a lot of money, not just on tax, but complying with regulation. When you look at tax, they talk about small business. They have an employment incentive. They're trying to push it. One of the simplest things you can do for small business is say you're not going to be taxed on accrual. You're going to be taxed on cash. Here you are. You send a VAT invoice to government. Government doesn't pay the invoice. And now SARS wants 15%. That kills the small business right there. Keep them on cash. Understand what that business is about and respect it.
One of the most encouraging things that came out of this budget, which was something that really burned the acting SARS Commissioner Mark Kingan, is that his numbers were affected because they paid out a lot of VAT refunds, 20 billion rands worth of VAT refunds, which is their job to do it.
Yes.
But it sent an encouraging signal to me that finally SARS is releasing that VAT money, which was being held on to by Tito Mboweni's SARS in order to boost the numbers and make them look better than they were. At least it's beginning to move. The wheels are being greased a little bit.
I think look, one thing is if you start withholding VAT refunds that are really the private sectors, you are killing small business cash flow. So that is terrible. Now, the way they announced it back in the medium-term budget policy statement, it was kind of a quiet stimulus package. All right, that was where they're putting the money back in, which I guess is a good thing. But the point is they should be doing it regardless. What you're doing is they're not really giving money. They're actually giving back the money that the small business rightfully should have in the first place.
Exactly.
So they're really not stealing money.
All they're doing is facilitating cash flow, and by not doing so, removing money from the system kills small businesses. Enough on that for the time being. I want to know from each one of you whether or not we're headed to the cliff, whether or not we're going to get the downgrade. That is the big question, of course. Most people I've spoken to over the last day or two suggest that we may dodge a March downgrade, but see a downgrade at some point this year as inevitable. Is there a way of avoiding it? We'll get to that. But let's face the facts first. Just how broken is the South African economy? We'll get to that in just a moment on the special edition, budget edition of Taking Stock.